Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Leonard Volling. I'm the VP of Microsoft Services here at Critical Start. And today we're going to be having a discussion around the challenges related to cybersecurity and cyber insurance. And joining me for that discussion is Microsoft and Spencer Fain. Uh, Before we get into it, a couple of quick bits of housekeeping. There will be Q&A. We want this to be a conversation. We want the fireside chat to really shine through. But in regards to Q&A, please leverage the Teams functionality to submit your questions. And then towards the end of the session, we'll have 10 or 15 minutes dedicated to Q&A and more of an open chat. This session is being recorded. So you will receive that recording after the webinar, and you'll be able to go back and watch for any resources or references you want to dig into. Already introduced myself. Also joining me today is John Smeltzeitz from Microsoft, Director of Partner Development, and then Sean Tuma from Spencer Fain, who's a partner with that firm. So first, we're going to start by handing the baton over to John, and then after John gets a chance to level set on Microsoft's point of view on cyber insurance challenges, he'll hand it back to Sean and myself to get more into the fireside chat aspect of the discussion. So, John, please take it away.
All right, thank you, Leonard. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. John Schmelzeis here. I'm a Director of Partner Development at Microsoft, and it's my privilege to work with great organizations like Critical Start, and really pleased to be speaking with everyone who's presenting today as well. So thank you for that opportunity, Sean in particular. So what I'm going to first go over here are challenges facing the industry in general, just help set the stage, so to speak, for what I'm sure will be a very informative discussion between Leonard and Sean. I'm certainly looking forward to listening to that discussion as well. So why don't we jump right in? I think, first of all, it's important to understand some of the challenges facing the cyber insurance industry from their perspective and from a macro perspective, so to speak. So I, for one, I think like most folks understand that cybersecurity is a large issue. It's a very large issue, and I think people are often surprised to see exactly how large of an issue it is. For example, by 2025, it will be over 10.5 trillion in losses that are projected associated globally with cybercrime. And so that is, if you were to make that an analog to country sizes, that would make that loss equate to the third largest economy in the world after the US and China. It's also going to represent the greatest transfer of economic wealth in history. And the another, I think, notable and frankly unfortunate statistic is that cybercrime is going to prove to be more profitable than the global trade of all major illegal drugs worldwide. And so for those who like to follow the markets or pay attention to folks like Warren Buffett, who I think, and many do agree, thinks quite well about things, from his viewpoint, it's that cyber crime is the #1 problem facing humankind, and cyber attacks are a bigger threat to humanity than nuclear weapons. And so what we're seeing on the right-hand side is, I think, in addition to my being surprised, a lot of people, including insurers, were surprised at the growth rate as well associated with cybercrime. And that's what we're seeing reflected in this table on the right-hand side. What's showing is us is insurer loss ratios and how those have increased up until 2020. And then from 2020 to 2021, we see those loss ratios decline. And so we'll talk on the next slide, please, and just about what's causing that change from 20 to 21. And what's causing it is really several things. One is, as many of you on the call may know, premiums are increasing significantly, and that's what that is showing us on the top right of this slide. Is in 2020 the change growth in cyber insurance premiums, and as you can see, they're going up to the right very aggressively. Additionally, the insurers are requiring and implementing stricter criteria for those who are applying for coverage, and clients need to demonstrate they practice at minimum basic cyber hygiene, including measures such as multi-factor authentication. So it's generally understood if one cannot demonstrate certain baseline controls, the vast majority of insurers are going to say no. And so in many cases, it's no longer a discussion of, can I get a good premium? Can I be insured? Becomes the conversation at that point. Next slide, please. So, what are you and what are customers in general facing as a result of this environment in this context? And we put that into what we call the 4 Cs. The first C being cyber risk and the attacks, the cybercrime itself is a challenge. And something notable there is that unfortunately, ransomware is now the fastest growing and the go-to method of attack for cyber criminals. And that's particularly pernicious because in addition to potentially paying to have one's resources unlocked, so to speak, then there's this secondary conversation that sometimes happens around, well, what do you want to pay me now to ensure I don't release that information publicly? Of course, even if one were to potentially pay that second fee, what's the guarantee that that still won't be released? We're not exactly dealing with ethical people here, right? So this is a very challenging situation. The other is the cost to defend itself. Most cybersecurity budgets at US organizations are increasing linearly or they are flat. But as we've talked about, the cyber attacks are growing exponentially. And then this is all happening in the context of a contracting economy. There's quantitative tightening, there's inflation, and discussion of a potential recession as well. And then the final C is complexity. On average, organizations have 76 security tools to manage their businesses and attempt to protect their businesses. And that has increased in particular with the shift to cloud and the increased remote work as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, we've talked a little bit about how cyber insurers are responding to these challenges. And so there's several things to go over here. One is, if I can draw your attention to the top right, what that's highlighting is something in the context of the following. There are not yet common standards, as many of you may know, that exist between various cyber insurers. There's no national standard yet. For example, there are, however, controls that are commonly of focus for underwriters, and so that's the list that you see in the top right here. As an example, some of them are adequate authentication procedures, timely patch management, endpoint detection and response, and that's a really big focus in the marketplace right now. Cyber insurance awareness and training, to name a few. I also mentioned earlier this idea of basic cybersecurity controls and practices. And at Microsoft, we refer to this as the cybersecurity bell curve. And what this is referring to is that basic security hygiene still protects against 98% of attacks. And what do we mean by basic hygiene? We're referring to utilizing anti-malware, applying least privilege access, enabling multi-factor authentication, keeping versions of software up to date, and protecting data, right? Implementing those practices protects against 98% of attacks. Additionally, there's an opportunity through our great partnership with Critical Start for them to work with your organization and provide a security assessment. This does several things, which you see listed here. One is there's a strategy and plan workshop. They'll also review secure scores with you. And secure score refers to a way of measuring your security posture on on-premise environments, cloud environments, hybrid environments, and even multi-cloud environments. And then there are secure scores for Microsoft PaaS services or software as a service offerings such as Microsoft 365 or Office 365. And then included in this is a cost-saving analysis through which an inventory takes place of your current technology tools, which we've talked about earlier. On average, there's 79 tools at play in a given organization, and to see if there's an opportunity for consolidation and security through simplicity. And then receive a strong level of engagement, obviously, from Critical Start and Microsoft as well. Next slide, please. So there's a number of benefits that customers have seen from going through this exercise and analysis. And so my recommendation to folks on the call is request an assessment of Critical Start. It's a no obligation assessment. In many cases, it can be provided if you have a Microsoft account team you work with at no cost. And it enables you to quantify your security vendor consolidation opportunity specific to your organization. The additional thing you could do is test out Microsoft security technology in a no obligation manner. And then the third is make an informed decision if and how you may like to proceed. So at this point, I'm going to highlight some resources, and then I'll turn it over to Leonard and Sean. Yep. Oh, really quickly too. Additionally, one of the things that there's a discussion around is this idea of security through simplicity. And we mentioned how many different vendor technologies organizations have. And so I do want to highlight for those who may not, in your organization, who may not be as familiar with Microsoft security technology, what some third parties such as Forrester are recognizing, and Gartner as well. And you could see on both of these slides that Microsoft is in the top right quadrant. And I mentioned earlier the role that endpoint detection and response is playing in the forefront in a lot of organizational discussions around security. And Microsoft is in the upper right-hand quadrant there as well. So please take comfort in that and know that it's really a best of breed platform, and it provides that continuity in view and that connection between all the disparate technologies that enables a comprehensive and a secure through simplicity view. Next slide, please. And finally, I wanted to highlight some resources for all of you if you're interested in digging a little bit, both resources behind some of the statistics that I've shared today, and then also I'll draw your attention to the very bottommost link. I personally found this interesting. It's in the teens in terms of number of pages. It's a relatively easy read. But the state of New York, I mentioned earlier that there is not a common standard among insurers, and the state of New York is really leading and providing some thought leadership to insurance companies, trying to help drive a standards creation. And so if you're interested in understanding what potential insurers you may be engaged with today or considering engaging with are hearing and guidance they're being provided, again, it's a relatively easy read. That's what that last link does. And then finally, the link above it explains this security through simplicity concept that I've made reference to several times as well. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Leonard and Sean. Again, I'm really looking forward to this discussion as well, and thank you for the investment of your time today.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, John. I think that was a fantastic level set, and I think really hits at the essence of a lot of what customers need to be thinking about, as it relates to cyber insurance and how Microsoft Security Solutions could help. So, Sean, I'll welcome you onto the virtual stage with me here. I think we're on video. We're all off mute. So, I think to get things started, I'd like to kind of throw a question to you, Sean, and just ask, whether it's mostly from your perspective, right? What's going on in the insurance industry, that has changed over the last 12 months or so. What's making it harder? Just generally, what are you seeing?
Sure. Thank you, Leonard. It's a pleasure to be here. And John, great job on the information you presented. And I'm sure for a preliminary matter, one of the things most people are wondering why right now is why in the heck do I have a lawyer talking to me about cybersecurity and cyber insurance issues? I'll just tell you briefly, I've been practicing in cyber law since 1999, before it really even became an issue. 100% of my practice is devoted to guiding companies through the either the incident response process or helping them with their cyber risk management and cyber maturity. And a huge part of that these days is dealing with cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is critical in the incident response process. Most don't understand how much it actually controls of incident response. And proactively getting cyber insurance has become a much bigger issue, as John mentioned. So to answer your question, Leonard, what we've seen over the last really 3 years now, 2 to 3 years, is a maturing of the cyber insurance market. It was way underpriced for a long time for many reasons. And there's been a course correction, if you will, over the last couple of years. Number two, as John mentioned, ransomware has been an epidemic that we've all been dealing with. The cyber insurance markets have been paying a whole lot of money out, that they haven't been making money on premiums, and so they're trying to correct that and find where that proper balance is. And then really third, and I think the one that most people don't understand, is cyber insurance is integrally involved in dealing with so many of these incidents that they're seeing through their work. So when they come to us like a breach coach and say, hey, you're representing this company, they just had this cyber incident. What is the root cause of this? Why did this happen? This goes to a lot of what John said about 98% of these being fairly, failures of basic hygiene. And so we're reporting back. The companies are reporting back to these carriers on what the root cause of these losses are, and the carriers are learning from that, and they're putting together their own lists that are saying companies that don't have MFA, companies that are using remote desktop, that don't have backups, all these are costing us all this money. So before we write new business for them, we're going to make them go in and not do these things that are causing so much in the amount of losses and successful cyber attacks. How's that for a long lawyerly answer to a short question? There.
No, I think it's perfect, Sean. And I think a lot of the people here, myself included, right? We're more of IT practitioners typically. Now, we don't have good profile on the exact roles that have been able to join us. It might be someone at our customer that's more on the legal side. It might be someone more on the financial side. The expectation, I think, is it's a lot of folks that are more from the IT and security side or cyber side. So I think this is good perspective, for them to have. Right?
And Leonard, that what you just said is so important for everyone to understand. Cyber is the true team sport here. You've got to have your IT folks, but you need your legal, you need your risk, you need your operations. Everybody has a role to play in this, and they have to be working together on this.
Yep. And that's true when it comes to risk. That's true when it comes to incident response. I mean, we again think of incident response primarily in the cyber sense, but obviously in the real world and now with IoT, incident response, can spill into a lot of different categories, whether it's, the physical, plant out there, right, that's being monitored and protected, or whether it's, how we respond to actual cyber incidents, or the combination of these things and how that unfolds, from a legal perspective, a forensics perspective, a PR perspective. So I guess, as we think about it, a lot of behavior is driven by cost, right? So I mean, these costs affect our ability to invest in security controls. Costs obviously are a factor in this discussion. So I guess as a kind of a continuation, I'm curious, from your perspective, what are the trends? What can companies kind of expect, as it relates to cost?
Sure. So over really the last 2 years now, they have seen at least doubling, sometimes tripling of premiums to get the same limits of a policy. They've also seen a substantial increase in the retentions that are, so basically the deductibles, what the insurance carriers call retention or self-insured retention. They've seen those increase dramatically. They've seen what's called sublimits being put into policies that unfortunately are decreasing. So what a sublimit is it's, let's say you have a $5 million total cyber risk policy, but it has a sublimit of only 1 million for network extortion, or what they would call a ransomware, or cyber extortion, what we would call a ransomware. That means out of your $5 million policy, only 1 million of it covers the ransomware side. So you've got to understand those sublimits very carefully. And then, the other thing I will add to that is this year, over the last couple of months, actually, we're hearing that there's more of a leveling of the market. So while you've seen these substantial increases over the last couple of years, it looks like it is stabilizing now as far as that financial cost goes. So what you saw last year may be more equivalent to what you're going to see again this year, but it's what we've called a hardening of the market. So now it's kind of flattening out, but those controls and your maturity from a cyber risk standpoint as an organization is going to impact this now as much as ever. So getting your security house in order is going to help you with your cyber insurance.
Yep, absolutely. Well, yeah, and to me that personally makes a lot of sense, and I might take a chance to take a little bit of a detour down, kind of that rabbit hole real quick. So when we think about some of the Microsoft capabilities that are available, I think there's a couple of references I wanted to make. So I know everybody's probably enjoying our nice fire, cozy fire that we're around here, but the first stop I want to make is getting into this concept of an attack chain, right? So as we've been discussing, cyber insurance providers are getting a lot more critical of how are attackers breaching, compromising an environment. How are they getting in? What are they doing? What's our ability? What's the root cause, right, of these attacks? And so it's important to, I think, be able to leverage something like this as a backdrop, right? Attackers are still attacking, through phishing email. That's a dominant attack vector. Obviously, whether it starts with an email or starts on an endpoint, where we look at things like exploitation and installation and command and control, ultimately they're trying to get credentials. They're trying to get either normal user credentials as a stepping stone, or the ultimate goal of getting to privileged accounts. So, when you think about this spectrum, or this kind of life cycle of attack chain, there's those different elements, and it's important that you have controls at all of those layers. And so we look at Defender for Office 365 as a way to protect at the email and collaboration layer. A Defender for Endpoint, a way to protect your endpoints, whether they're PCs, servers, mobile devices, etc. The capabilities focused on identity, whether it's on-premises identity or cloud identity, or for most organizations, it's both. And then capabilities that are relevant to cloud applications. SaaS applications are a large part of the portfolio for most organizations today. And so having this kind of capability that provides coverage more end to end is, I think, really important from just a control perspective. And then I think, as John alluded to a little bit, also maybe from a cost and a complexity perspective. So that's one kind of reference point I wanted to make. Another is, something like this. A little bit of an eye chart, but hopefully a good reference as you think about just the general categories that some of these controls or capabilities might fit into. Solution areas is probably more of a, that's just Leonard or Critical Start's point of view. And then the Microsoft products and suites that might be relevant. And then probably the most important of what everybody's here today is these cyber underwriter focused controls. So I took the list that Microsoft referenced. I also kind of squared that with a couple of other points of view that I've been tracking related to this topic. And so when you look at those cyber underwriter focused controls, it's a list of 10 or so things that, in my opinion, most of which fit into cyber fundamentals. So, I think this idea of cyber insurance, as relatively new as it is, and this us crossing this chasm from what's it going to cost me to am I even insurable? Most of these things we've got to be doing just as fundamentals, right? Eat your vegetables kind of thing. So, adequate authentication procedures, leveraging MFA, that is a must do. Network access controls, I think that's pretty well established. Everybody's doing that, has been doing that. When we think about endpoint detection and response, that is an area I think that's pretty well penetrated at this point. But there's also kind of the idea of endpoint protection. Either way, you've got to have strong capability there that allows you to have the visibility and allows you to get to the root cause, allows you to do the forensics. A classic, patch management. How long have we been saying you've got to patch things? You've got to patch things in a timely manner. You've got to make sure everything is patched. And there's definitely constraints, but this is stuff we've got to do, and we've got to do well. So, even the things that are in the good cyber hygiene category, like limiting privileged accounts through technologies like privileged identity management or enterprise privilege management, and then monitoring. the ability to not just have a bunch of signal about our environment, but the ability to leverage that signal to stop breaches and respond to security alerts. That's where an EDR and capabilities like MDR go hand in glove. So I hope this maybe can serve as a good backdrop as we continue the conversation here. But Sean, I'm curious, whether we're thinking about the controls aspect or the cost aspect or the insurability aspect, from your perspective, what should people be focused on, as they interact with providers and start to explore, getting coverage, what it's going to cost, if they're eligible, what are maybe a few kind of key questions they should be, thinking about or asking?
So I think the most important thing, Leonard, that they can do is start by understanding the process and understanding why the insurance carriers are going through this process, understanding the parties that are involved, because at the end of the day, you have to understand the most fundamental part of this is an insurance company is in essence gambling or betting on your security posture. They're putting their money on the line in the hopes that you don't have an event that's going to cause them to have to pay out a bunch of money, because they're in the business of making money. And so to do a better job at that, they need to have a better understanding of your risk. The carriers, so you have multiple parties involved in this. You have obviously your company, that's going to be the insured. You have the broker most of the times, that's who you're going to work with, that's going to be your advocate to then go to the insurance carrier's underwriter. The underwriter is who looks at your risk and says, do I want to place this bet or not? And if so, how much money am I putting on the line, and what am I going to charge you to step up to the table? What's your premium going to be? Okay. Those all, at the end of the day, your job is to help convey the security posture in the best way possible of your organization and get it across to that underwriter. Okay. They're going to start with a list of questions. The more money you're asking for in insurance coverage, the more in depth that's going to get. Now, a lot of companies get offended, quite frankly, at the outset when the carrier through the broker says, I want to know about your security, because they think, who are you to be asking about my security? What do you know about security? I know my own environment, all this. What they don't understand, number one, is a lot of these underwriters now are former security professionals. Many of them are CISOs, former CISOs, who have been hired by the carriers because of their understanding of security and certain industries in particular. Number two, instead of being offended by these questions, companies need to understand they really are getting almost like a top 10 list of where you're most likely going to have an incident, because the carriers are relying on their information that may be some of the best information out there about where these risks and these attacks are really coming from, because they are integrally involved in the incident response process and calling the shots. Many a times companies don't learn that until they get in the incident response process. Then they're upset to see how much control they actually have. They should have known that by understanding their coverages, right? But the big picture lesson here is the better you are able to convey your risk posture, hopefully in a positive way, to that underwriter, the better your chances of getting good coverage at a good price are going to be. And when you have tools available that can help you pull all this complexity together in a more simple manner and in a more accurate manner and say, look, here are the answers to your questions. Okay. You got to answer the questions, But then here's further explanation that you need to know. We understand our risks. That's a huge factor. So whenever you're able to use tools like we're talking about here, or the assessments like we're talking about that Critical Start does, to say, hey, I understand my risks and we're working on plans to mitigate this if we haven't already, that shows such a sign of maturity to the underwriters that they have more faith in you. It's better than saying we have no risk, right? Because they know that's nonsense. And so using these tools in this process, they have a sophisticated understanding. You just have to be able to convey that message. And these are great ways to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, risk management, I think on the surface comes across as a fairly advanced topic. Obviously, it can cover a lot of areas, but to your point, we can be very conscious of cyber risk and be much more proactive over, not just doing the fundamentals, not just having good hygiene, but really understanding how all these things fit together. There's always going to be a last mile. But if we're doing all of those, doing the 80%, we can, I think, as organization, as security practitioners, feel good that we're taking risk out of our environment. And then, obviously that relates into the conversations we could have with insurers potentially, right?
Yeah, I mean, Leonard, in my practice, I represent the full range of clients from the small mom and pops to, the very sophisticated companies, global, international. Um, and the risk varies company to company. No two companies are identical. But one of the things we struggle with so much is the complexity and the disagreement, if you will, among experts about what's most important. And we see so many security professionals that suffer from what I call paralysis by analysis. They're spending all their time trying to figure out what's the best thing to do instead of saying, hey, look, while we're working on figuring out the very best things to do, let's go do these things that we may disagree about what needs to be first, second, third, fourth, all right, or 10th, but we know they're all in the top 10. So let's just go start by doing those. And when we get those done, then we can start on maybe the next list. They spend their time sitting around lost in that minefield of complexities instead of just acting many of the times. And so having a list like this from your carrier. So the other thing you need to remember as a security professional is a lot of what these carriers are wanting you to do, you have been wanting to do for a long time, but you couldn't get the resources, the budget, or executive level buy-in sometimes to do it. You now have great cover through your carrier by saying, hey, look, we have to go do this or we're not going to get coverage. This is an opportunity for you to not look at this as intrusiveness from them, but as giving you another tool in your toolbox to take to go to whomever you need to get the approval and the budget you may need to move forward. So there's opportunity here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And I took the liberty to go ahead and jump into kind of the call to action. We're getting close to our kind of our open discussion Q&A time. But, I think this is the idea. Obviously in my world, at Critical Start, we're a cybersecurity company. So we have a ton of expertise in cybersecurity controls. What does it take? How do we think about our cybersecurity capabilities? How do we frame that up against maybe something like, the NIST framework or all the other ways we can kind of think about, our strategy or our program? Microsoft Secure Score has been mentioned a few times. This is something built into the Microsoft tools, and we can maybe in a moment jump into that and take a quick look at it in a demo environment. But this is a way built in that Microsoft offers to do some of this measurement of maturity, to do some of this measurement of, hey, where are we at on this control, MFA? where are we at on privileged identity management, and have that visibility into where you stand today, put a score to it, and then let that help drive a plan to improve your secure score, thereby improving your maturity, thereby lessening your risk, again, setting you up for success. And then some of the advanced capabilities, if you will, that really are critical today. I mean, I think, we use terms like advanced or transformation or modern. A lot of things on that quote unquote advanced list today are table stakes. It's been maybe 5 years or so, right, when EDR was new, right, or 5 or 6 years. So these things today are kind of core capabilities really that every organization needs to have. So happy to have kind of a 30-minute consult with anyone on attending that would like to explore these concepts further, understand that assessment motion we can engage around, how to leverage secure score, consider things like Microsoft security workshops, etc. So that's one offer. And then I think in regards to the legal consult, Sean, that your firm is offering, I think you've hit on these topics just through some of your comments. But is there anything you'd like to highlight from that 30-minute consult that you're offering?
Sure. Just, one of the messages I want people to understand is if you haven't been through a significant incident response process, you may not understand just how much of cyber is truly a legal issue. It's truly a business issue. It's a regulatory issue. And you can't really accurately assess your cyber risk if you don't understand your overall business risk that comes through cyber and that comes through the legal and regulatory component. Because at the end of the day, most of the not the carrots, but the sticks come through that legal and that regulatory component, and it can be overwhelming to businesses. So one of the things I just like to help businesses understand is how that plays in and where they may be finding that risk that they're not aware of. And then, obviously we're talking about cyber insurance here. So to the extent, folks want to talk more about that, maybe where you are, where you're trying to get to, whether it's even a worthwhile process for you. Some companies are deciding against cyber insurance right now for various reasons. So happy to talk about that. And then the other thing is, we're talking about cyber maturity here. That's what everybody's trying to get to, is being more mature, whether it's for insurance purposes, whether it's for, heaven forbid, protecting your organization, right? That's what we're really talking about at the end of the day. But a big factor in that is how well do you understand your what an incident really involves, what true incident response preparation is. It's way beyond the IT function. It's understanding who your team is, who it needs to be, how they're going to be ready for action, whether you have those critical members of your team approved and ready to go into action under your cyber insurance. That's a huge factor. A lot of companies don't understand until it's too late, and then they're losing not just hours but days of time trying to get all of that organized. So those are the kind of things we can talk about as well. But I'm happy to visit. Like you said, Leonard, a free 30-minute consultation to talk about these issues or whatever else folks may want to talk about.
Great. No, thanks, Sean. I appreciate kind of that added color to what that kind of conversation might entail. Well, I do have, I think, one final question I'd like to ask you, but before I do, I'm going to take a detour back to this list. Again, the cyber underwriter focus control, that is just pulled from the Microsoft reference, and again some other references that I've seen related to this topic. Again, I don't think you don't need to do an assessment. You don't need to even necessarily leverage secure score to look at these 10 or so controls and say, man, we've got to be doing this stuff in today's world. With cloud, with remote work, with the proliferation of cyber attacks, with what these attacks are doing, i.e. ransomware, and what their damage they're doing from a environment perspective or from a cost perspective. These are things we got to be doing as cybersecurity practitioners. So, if you need a simple checklist, please start here. Work on these things, whether it's fundamental or just good cyber hygiene. The message there is everything on this list is really important. One place that I didn't see treated directly, that doesn't mean it's not, is information protection. I would expect that to come more and more into focus. Data ultimately is what we're trying to protect more often than not. But with that reference in mind, I am going to jump into just a very quick demo of SecureScore, since that's been mentioned a couple of times. I wanted folks to kind of have a feel for that. And so to provide that, I'm going to jump into security.microsoft.com. So this is Microsoft's M365 Defender security portal, and there's a lot of things you can do here. Again, across asset management. What's the health of my devices? Are they patched? Do they have vulnerable software? The EDR function, email threat protection, cloud app threat protection, identity threat protection. It's all brought in here. But the reason we're here is to look at SecureScore. So this SecureScore, I currently have a score in this demo environment of 33.94. I can see that compared to organizations of similar size, I think both of these scores, 33 and 46, need improvement. So this is an easy way, whether I'm thinking about cyber insurance or not, to come in here and measure yourself, right? Like where do I sit today? You can see the top recommended actions here require multi-factor authentication. Now, this one is specifically for administrative roles. Block legacy authentication. That is something we recommend to all of our customers. There's no good reason at this point for that to be left on. So there's some advanced capabilities, again, quote unquote, advanced capabilities buried in here as well. But for each of these things, I can drill in and get more information about, okay, what exactly is being recommended here. And then beyond that, I can even think about what do I need to do to leverage. This is specific to the Microsoft technologies, but to get this important control deployed. And then I can also manage the status of this. Is it something I'm planned? Is this a risk I've accepted? Hopefully not. Definitely not for this particular one. Again, MFA is critical to all your accounts, your normal user accounts and your admin user accounts. But there might be
instances. And Leonard,
go ahead.
You're not getting cyber insurance without that today. It's highly unlikely, probably impossible.
Yep. Good point. So I just wanted you all to see that. If you want to explore that on your own, go to secure.microsoft.com and look around there. Find the SecureScore tab. There's lots of additional information. Again, we can dig into that on that consult call if needed, or this would absolutely present itself as a part of the assessment motion that Microsoft referenced. So I'm going to stop that and come back. And I think ask Sean you a closing question before we open it up to Q&A and just general discussion. So, I guess generally, right? This is relatively new. It's been around now for a couple years, a few years, I guess, depending on the angle. But what crystal ball time, right? What trends do you see? In terms of trying to look forward 6 months, 12 months, or however far out you're comfortable.
So in terms of cyber insurance or in terms of cyber risk in general?
Yeah, I think probably both if you're able to fit that into a few minutes, but cyber insurance I think is probably the dominant lens we're thinking of here.
Yes. So what we're seeing is we're seeing a continued maturing of the cyber insurance markets and their understanding of risks. We're seeing, I think we're going to continue to see more insurance carriers partnering with technology providers for scanning of networks, for looking for assessments. They're looking for any tool they can find that's going to help them better assess companies' risks. So you have these carriers out there that are called insurtechs. It's where they're basically an insurance company partnering with a technology vendor to help better assess that. For those, I think a tool like we're talking about here would be really effective for seeing that. We're going to continue to see industry, well, not industry, political branches, so governments pushing to make ransomware payments illegal. We've seen that in North Carolina for state industries already. We're going to see more of that happening. I think that push, the insurance coverage isn't going to then be available for those in those jurisdictions. So insurance has been a great safety net for a long time, but we're going to probably see less coverage for ransomware type cases, which means it's more important to be protecting your data and your networks at the forefront to not fall into that extortion type. We're seeing a big trend right now in ransomware threat actors that are not encrypting, but are only stealing data and using that for the extortion leverage. They're calling customers, they're calling people whose data they've stolen to put pressure on the organizations. There's a bit of tension right now amongst the carriers about a willingness to pay significant sums of money to these threat actors to not do that, because number one, you've already got the notification obligations. Number two, as John mentioned early on, you're dealing with criminals, so they have your data. They're not going to delete that data. So why are you paying them, right? So coverage for that's going to be more challenging. And then I think looking for an understanding of the exclusions in your policies, we're seeing one of the probably the second biggest category of cases we see right now after ransomware are these basic invoice, what we call business email compromise. So when the threat actors get themselves in the middle of an email communication, which usually comes about from not having multi-factor authentication on your email, right? We're seeing more policies require you have specific internal controls in place within your organization before they'll even provide coverage for that event. And if they do, it's still sublimited down to a very low amount. So there again, that MFA, that understanding that issue is critical. So it's all working together at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I mean, in the end, you don't want to find yourself, dealing with a proper breach. Right? It's just this is not a place you want to be, and so whether again it's the career implications or the company implications or other, you really need to be investing in these controls so that you are protected as much as possible. There's nothing bulletproof, but you need to be doing everything you possibly can, and then you need to have good monitoring. Right, good security monitoring, and that's where a firm like Critical Start with our MDR can come in, watch those security tools, and help keep the bad guy out. That's ultimately what we want to do.
Leonard, one thing, if I'm going to be feel bad if I don't mention this, because I know we have a lot of folks from healthcare on right now. Mm-hmm. And the primary regulator for the healthcare industry is the United States Health and Human Services Department, an Office of Civil Rights in particular. And one of the things the OCR has been really pushing in the last year is the implementation of recognized security practices. And so they're looking whenever they're doing an investigation, which starts with what they call a data request, leads to an investigation that then leads to an enforcement action. They are looking very carefully at whether healthcare either covered entities or business associates, have implemented what they call recognized security practices. And they're using that as a mitigating factor, but you have to be able to document that and you have to show your work, if you will. And so through like that table you put up earlier, that showed the various steps and where it tied to certain things like NIST or whatnot. These are very critical should you ever find yourself in front of the OCR it's not really a get out of jail free card, but it certainly is a mitigating factor that helps a lot. So know that.
No, I appreciate you calling that out, Sean. And yeah, I mean, for me, it on the cyber side, it comes back to good documentation and the importance of that. I think we touched on that pretty explicitly with the incident response plan, concept, but also just as it relates to, your controls, your program, what you're doing. So I appreciate you drawing that out for this. I know we've got a lot of healthcare folks on the line. So yeah, just in terms of wrapping up the presentation segment here, thank you for your time, everybody that was able to join us. I'll get into the Q&A here in just a moment. I know there was an ask about the slides. Again, the recording will be available. In regards to the slides, I'm not sure if we're posting those as well or sending those out as well, but we're happy to. Obviously, you can check out Critical Start website, or you can check out Spencer Fain's website. Should be easy to find, with a quick search, and you can navigate that. Or if you reach out to us, info@criticalstart.com, we'll make sure you get the slides. We'll make sure you get connected to an expert that you're able to have those conversations, whether it's with Critical Start or Spencer Fain or both. So let's look at some of the other questions here real quick. Anything from the panelists that you'd like to kind of flag as a question while I get into the actual Q&A here?
Hey, Leonard, one question I just saw that's written out about what small and mid-sized healthcare practices can do. Pivoting off of what I just said about the recognized security practices, the OCR HHS has put out a website called 405d.gov that lays out a lot of this stuff in a very simplified manner. And I say that because I'm actually doing a webinar on it tomorrow as well on the 405d. It's really a great way of simplifying the complexity of a lot of what's in NIST or whatnot. And so it's a good place to get started.
Yes. I mean, for me, how do folks know more information about the webinar? Is that the link in the chat?
So the best way would probably be for them to just email me, because it's actually with a healthcare insurance group here in Texas, TMLT, that insures a lot of Texas and outside healthcare entities, but it's to help people better understand in the healthcare industry how to start with the basics, if you will. And so I'd be happy to send them the link and help get them signed up.
That sounds perfect. So I don't know that we had your email address in the presentation. That's something we'll have to correct. But obviously they can email info@criticalstart, or they can email you direct. I'll defer to you on how you want to offer that email address up, if you want to put it in the chat or other.
I just put it in the chat, and I'll tell you what it is, though my Texas accent might mess it up. It's stuma@spencerfain.com. So if you got my name, you can find it.
Yeah. So first initial, last name at spencerfain.com. Great. Well, thanks. That sounds like a perfect, kind of response for that individual that was looking for kind of, what can we do, lean, and this is something we see a lot. And I think part of that lends itself to, selfishly to something like Critical Start and bringing our services to bear. Obviously, budget is a factor there, but you need the expertise to get these controls in place and the expertise to operationalize these tools, in an ongoing manner. So was there any other questions in the chat. Again, I saw one on the resources. Hopefully we've addressed that. And I know John's been posting some links, as well. So yeah, I think that might bring us to a good stop. We'll have one last call for questions or comments in the chat. I'm not sure if folks are able to come off mute, but if someone was compelled to, we certainly would welcome that. But we'll hold just a minute here. Again, thank you for your time. Hope it was valuable. So yeah, sorry, seeing some chats coming in there. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and call it a wrap. So again, this is recorded. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, John. Really appreciate you spending this time with us today to chat a little bit with folks, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Been a pleasure. Thank you, Leonard.